In 1850, 500,000 Kashmiri weavers created the world's most coveted luxury textile. By 1890, a single machine in Scotland destroyed them all. This is how an entire civilization of craftspeople vanished in one generation. In 1850, a Kashmiri weaver could feed a family of 6 on the wages of a single shawl. The Kashmir Valley produced roughly 2 million shawls that year, each one taking between 9 months and 3 years to complete by hand. 500,000 artisans worked the looms. In Srinagar, in Lahore, in dozens of mountain villages, the sound of wooden shuttles was the sound of survival. These were not peasants. They were masters of a craft so precise, so coveted, that European emperors, Napoleon, Victoria, the Russian Tsars, paid what amounted to a year's salary for a single piece. A Kashmiri shawl was currency. It was status. It was proof that you had access to the world's finest. The industry had existed for roughly 400 years by the time the 19th century began. Persian emperors had patronized it. Mughal courts had woven it into the fabric of empire. By the 1800s, Kashmir shawls were the most profitable luxury export in British India, worth millions of pounds annually. A single shawl could cost £200 in London in 1840. That was the price of a house. The work itself was architecture in fiber. A master weaver memorized patterns of breathtaking complexity, the asterisk bode asterisk, the flowering vine, the garden geometry that Europeans called paisley, though the pattern came from Persia and arrived in Kashmir centuries before Scotland knew its name. Every thread was counted. Every knot was deliberate. A shawl's weight might be only 400 grams, yet it could take 250,000 thread passes to complete. The weaver's hands developed permanent indentations. Their eyes dimmed early, but the shawls they made were immortal. By 1850, this economy seemed permanent, unshakable. It had survived wars, invasions, the entire arc of empire. What no one in the Kashmir Valley could have predicted, what no loom master, no merchant, no British official in Calcutta anticipated, was that the end would come not from conquest, but from a machine invented in Lyon, France, in 1804, and perfected in Scotland in 1841. In 1804, Joseph Marie Jacquard invented a loom that could read, not think, not decide, read. Punched cards, the same principle that would later drive computer code, told the machine which threads to lift, which to lower, in what order, at what speed. By 1841, Scottish manufacturers had adapted Jacquard's invention to mass-produce paisley patterns. The result was catastrophic for Kashmir. In the 1840s, Scottish mills in Paisley and Jacquardton were flooding European markets with machine-made shawls that cost 1/10 the price of hand-loomed Kashmiri originals. A genuine Kashmir shawl required 18 months of labor and the accumulated skill of a master weaver, sometimes 2 weavers working in tandem, passing the needle back and forth across the loom in patterns only they could execute. A Scottish machine could produce an imitation in weeks. By 1850, British imports had begun to displace Kashmiri goods in London warehouses. By 1860, the collapse was undeniable. British tax records show Kashmiri shawl exports to Britain fell from 7,000 units annually to fewer than 400. The Valley's weavers did not see this coming. The guilds, the asterisk Karkhanas asterisk, had survived invasions, political upheaval, foreign rule. They had adapted before, but they had never faced an opponent that did not tire, did not demand wages, did not require rest. The machine was cheaper than poverty. It was more reliable than than any human hand. Yet there was a moment, brief, documented, and largely ignored, when someone in Kashmir did understand the threat. Someone saw the Scottish threat reports, the trade figures, the mill advertisements. Someone tried to warn the valley, but the warning came from an unexpected source, and it arrived too late to matter. By 1850, the Kashmiri shawl was worth more than gold. A single piece could fetch £200 in London, equivalent to a year's wages for a skilled worker. The industry employed 500,000 artisans across the valley. Then, in a single generation, it simply ceased to exist. The collapse was not gradual. It was mechanical. In 1804, Joseph Marie Jacquard invented the programmable loom in Lyon, France. By 1820, Scottish mills in Paisley had reverse-engineered the technology. They could now produce passable imitations of hand-woven Kashmiri shawls in weeks instead of months. The cost dropped from £200 to £2. The market did not fragment, it evaporated. Kashmiri weavers watched their orders vanish between 1850 and 1870. Some traveled to Calcutta seeking work. Others abandoned the loom entirely. By 1880, the valley's weaving population had collapsed to perhaps 50,000. By 1900, fewer than 5,000 remained. The archaeological record of this erasure is almost total. Account books simply stop. Guild records end mid-sentence. What makes this disappearance unique is its speed and its specificity. It was not famine. It was not conquest. It was a machine. The Jacquard loom did not replace individual weavers gradually. It displaced an entire economy in the span of one working lifetime. A master craftsman trained at age 10 could find himself unemployable by 35. His sons would never learn the trade. By 1890, the great weaving workshops of Srinagar and Baramulla stood empty. The finest artisans on earth had become redundant. But something unexpected happened in the ruins, something that would preserve the craft long enough for us to find it. A small group of weavers made a choice that no one could have predicted. By 1900, the Kashmir shawl industry had simply ceased to exist. The numbers tell the story: 500,000 weavers in 1850, fewer than 5,000 by 1900. Some historians dispute the exact figures. Records from the colonial period are fragmentary, but the direction is undeniable. A craft that had sustained entire families for 14 generations vanished in 50 years. What happened to those 495,000 people? The archives are largely silent. Some weavers died in poverty. Some migrated to Lahore, Delhi, and Bombay seeking work in emerging textile factories. Some turned to farming, though Kashmir's soil was never generous. The British colonial administration in India documented trade statistics obsessively, but they rarely recorded the names or fates of displaced artisans. They were invisible in their own dispossession. In Srinagar itself, something unexpected emerged from the wreckage. A handful of master weavers. Historians place the number between 40 and 60 by 1910, though sources vary, refused to abandon the craft entirely. They did not have customers anymore. The palaces of Europe no longer wanted their work. But they kept their looms. They taught their sons. They maintained the patterns in memory when paper records burned or were lost. These men faced a choice that shaped everything that followed: preserve the technique in secret or let it die cleanly. The decision was not heroic or planned. It was simply the only thing they knew how to do. By 1920, even the British colonial observers had stopped counting Kashmiri weavers. The industry had fallen so far below notice that its survival became possible. And in that obscurity, Something irreplaceable was saved, though not in any way the weavers could have imagined or controlled. But the question that haunts historians today is this: what were they actually preserving? What remains of the Kashmiri shawl industry today fits inside a handful of rooms? The Victoria and Albert Museum in London holds 287 documented Kashmir shawls from the 18th and 19th centuries, more than survive in Kashmir itself. The Craft Development Institute in Srinagar, established in 1958, preserves 143 pattern cards and 67 original shawl fragments. But these are monuments to absence, not continuity. The actual practice survives among perhaps 200 master weavers still working on traditional hand-looms in the old quarters of Srinagar in 2024. A single paisley shawl now takes between 6 months and 3 years to complete. The price has inverted entirely. Where a shawl once cost a merchant's yearly wages, today it costs between $8,000 and $40,000, placing it beyond even the wealthy collectors who once drove demand. Researchers at the Center of Research and Conservation, Kashmir University, have documented that approximately 90% of traditional pattern knowledge exists only in the hands of living weavers now over 65 years old. There is no comprehensive written archive of the weaving codes themselves. The Jacquard looms that destroyed the industry are themselves now obsolete, gathering dust in textile museums in Lyon and Manchester. What we have learned is this: technological displacement is not the same as cultural death, but it can feel identical to those who experience it. The open question remains whether the shawls that survive in museums represent the pinnacle of a living tradition or merely the most expensive artifacts of what was already, even then, becoming something preserved rather than practiced. But there is one shawl that suggests something else entirely. The Kashmiri shawl industry didn't fade. It was erased by a machine that could do in hours what took master weavers months. Another file is already open: the Luddites who fought back against their own obsolescence. Subscribe to the archive to witness how technology has repeatedly rewritten the fate of entire peoples.